Sound. From the novelist to the expert, from the beginner to the professional, from playing, experimenting, to creating a masterpiece. These are all the elements of art. And on this show, our art is sound. Hi folks, I'm L.V. Smith, the host of Sounds Within. And I like to keep my show in a way, it's not really my show, it's our show, because we like to have a variety of things. Sometimes it's musicians, sometimes it's business folks, sometimes it could be people who help others in the profession such as nursing or whatever, construction, doesn't matter. But today we're going to explore the underappreciated rich art of poetry, spoken word. And I can't think of a better person to have on this show is Mr. Christian Zimmerman, my buddy from Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
That's right.
Yeah.
Happy to be here, LV.
I am so honored to have you here.
Oh, I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm going to have to indoctrinate you like I do all others.
Uh-oh, that sounds scary.
Oh, yeah, no. I heard you, and we had a lot to share when we're not rolling in the grappling thing, and he's a great person there to learn from. If you need to learn anything about a grappling art in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, this guy here knows it. But we're going to start with my usual set of questions.
Sir.
What makes Christian Christian?
That's a deep question, LV. I would say first and foremost, the fact that I'm a husband and a father. Beyond all the other layers in my life, that is what defines me. But like any other person, there's many, many layers. For me, what makes me Christian is I try to be well-rounded in a lot of different things. For instance, you brought up the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, okay? Father, husband, but I practice Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I'm a guitar player. I'm a singer-songwriter. I practice in poetry. I love to cook. I'm an amateur chef. You know, for me, maybe I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. But to answer your question, I like to do a lot of different things, and I think it's important for all people to try many different things. It makes life rich and spicy, but that's what makes me me. I do a lot of things.
So you speak so humble. You strike me more as a man, a Renaissance man.
A Renaissance man.
A Renaissance man. I mean, you into everything, creating and experiencing and sharing all aspects of life.
Yeah, I don't like to harp on myself. I've been called a Renaissance man by my family and by my friends and by the students that I teach. So if that's what it is, that's what it is.
You teach?
A school teacher, yeah. I'm a middle school teacher in South LA.
So, hey, pay homage to this man. Anybody that is in the field of education, that's another underappreciated field.
And you should know. You're a retired teacher, are you not?
I love the profession. I still do love the profession, but now more than ever, the field is so challenging. What's out there. And that could be a whole show in itself.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going to come back another time on that one.
All right.
Okay, we're going to go to my next question. And that was such an exciting answer coming from a Renaissance man. What was the first sound you ever recall or remember hearing?
I'm going to have to say it was parental voices.
Parental
My parents' voices. But the interesting thing about that is there's such a stark contrast between my mother's sweet, loving, nurturing voice juxtaposed with my father's bombastic, stern, sort of yelling voice. So I remember my parents' voices, and they were antithetical. So nice, so quiet and loving, stern, disciplinarian, mean kind of yelling. And they just came together in a very unique way. But when I think about it, we talked a little bit about this before the camera started rolling. That's what my answer would be. That my earliest memories of sound are my parents' voices.
Must have been a loving family to be around.
Oh, it was interesting. Yeah, and loving. And, you know.
Okay, we all have our challenges in life.
Yes.
Hey, Okay, well, that's another show. So it looks like you're going to be coming around a lot.
I just live right down the road.
Ooh, don't ever tempt me like that. Okay, now we're going to be moving into the next part. What was the first sound that made you pursue what you do in life or enjoy in life?
I would have to say that not that I tried to emulate myself after him, not that I modeled my own songwriting or my own music after him, but I remember very early on really, really loving Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll.
King of rock and roll. I watched him whenever I could on television. I bought his records, listened to his records.
Now, what year did you first, or how old were you when you first caught your eye on Elvis?
Well, let's see, I'm 47 now. I was born in 1966, so I would say maybe around 4 or 5 years old. You know, I was doing Elvis routines in the living room. But I just thought he was a cool cat, man. And then, you know, from there, I just became a lover of rock and roll. My dad played the trumpet when he was in the Air Force.
Wow.
And he was, you know, he liked Elvis, but he then got heavy into Doobie Brothers and a lot of other
Brothers.
Yeah, and so I've just always had, beginning with Elvis, moving through just rock and roll from the 70s and 60s and 70s and, you know, leading up to Southern rock, like Leonard Skinner, country music. I like all kinds of music.
Yes.
But I'm coming from a traditional rock and roll background, for sure.
I got you. Now, this is going to lead to us finding out what you're about now. What do you do in sound that influence you to do what you're doing to express yourself?
Well, let's just say specifically regarding the poetry, because that's what I've brought you today. I've been writing poetry for a long time. Okay. I started in high school. It was
bad. What got you started in poetry?
What's that?
What got you started in poetry?
Well, what got me started in poetry were obviously some influential English teachers, but I didn't get interested in poetry until I started reading it out loud. I think poetry should be not only read the same poem multiple times, but you, even as a casual a person who enjoys poetry, should read it out loud. And then it really starts to speak to you, the nuance of the sound and the language. And that's what got me interested. I'd read 100 poems silently and was bored out of my mind.
Right.
But then I had this one teacher in high school that read them out loud with such passion. I just became very interested in it.
That really does make sense, because most of the poetry I remember, like you, was just read silently, in one ear, out the other. But why don't you give us a sample of some of your poetry?
Sure. I'd be happy to. I only brought 150.
Hey, not enough.
I got to put my glass. As you get older, you know, you can't see. Things go on you. This is called Day Trip.
Day Trip.
On either side of our bus, large windows perfectly frame the English countryside, slightly blurred as we ramble on toward Salisbury Plain. The unfading green, thick and damp, a slow and beautiful undulation sprawls away until its final escape from the eye. Taken by the heavy, low-slung mist, as gray as thoughts of London, where yesterday innocents abroad were swept into rivers of humanity flowing. To and from ancient sources, breaking then curling away into thinner branches, never stopping, a constant confluence of energies, the strength of which forced us to keep up even without a destination, until a sudden, inevitable burst of rain pulls me back to the window, where steady drops streak across the glass, muting the scene, to offer just an impression of the great ghostly stones, bone-colored, leaning as they stand, calling out over the millennia, but to whom? The sun? A god? To us? Only the dead can say, I thought I heard.
Whoa.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
You wrote that?
Oh, yes, of course I wrote
That just plain bit me in the hide. I didn't know where that came from. And I was just so immersed in it. I said, where were you at the time where you were writing this? What was it about, and what inspired this gorgeous piece of work?
Well, thank you very much. This was, we were in London, my family and I, a few summers ago.
Oh, that explains
And
the
we took a
mist
trip out.
in London.
Yeah, and the unending green, thick and damp. And we took a trip out to Stonehenge, and we took a bus ride.
Yes.
And it was pouring rain, and the scenery, like I said, was blurred as we were driving down this road out to Salisbury, and it was just so beautiful. And as we came into view of Stonehenge, it was just mystifying. It really moved me. But I didn't write this piece until we were back in Los Angeles, and I was actually at my school desk during my conference period.
Conference period.
Period.
And then how did?
Well, I was looking at pictures on my laptop of our trip to London, and I just said, let me write this, because that was such a great trip.
Wow, the moment was there.
While the moment was there. Yeah.
That's a good motivation to always encourage someone to keep those traditional two items around. Pencil and paper.
And paper, a notepad.
Pencil, I mean, just to be traditional, you have to get the
thoughts and ideas are like birds. They will land on the fence and they will disappear before you know it.
And you never see that same bird again.
It's so hard. I have come up with lines and words, whether for songs or poetry, and failed to write them down. And then, you know, you're like, oh God, what was that? Because it was beautiful.
Yes.
And they're gone.
Like a dream.
Yeah, so every writer should have a notepad with him.
And a lot of us may be writers and not know it, because heck, here you were sitting around a conference minute, and then you grab that pad and paper and you put it down and
Look,
share it like
I got a birthday card once years ago in college that said something to this effect: if you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. I love that sentiment. So there is a writer in all of us. You know, not everyone's going to be Shakespeare. Not everybody's going to be William Faulkner or William Carlos Williams, but everybody has something to say, you know? So I encourage my son to write.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now your son is going to probably be another edition for another show. Man, we're going to have to make you a part-time host or something like that.
I'm happy to do it.
I'm honored.
Happy to do it.
Now, we were talking about what pushed you towards writing. Who encouraged you to start doing this?
Well, I'd always been interested. My favorite classes were always English, my literature classes. So I was always somewhat drawn to reading novels and reading poetry. I had a couple of inspirational teachers in high school. I remember
remember their names?
Mrs. Ludke. Mrs. Ludke was one, and Miss Price, who was actually not my teacher, but I spent some time with her. So they sort of brought that out of me. But it really wasn't until college. And my first degree is in English literature, and my focus was creative writing. And the professor I had, his name is David Wevel, and he is a very accomplished published poet. And he was hanging out with, you know, all the greats. I mean, you know, Sylvia Plath, Ted Hughes, all those people. And I was nervous as hell. And I took the class and I started submitting my work, and he really liked it. And he told the whole class. I remember we would read our poems to the class, and the class would critique them and he would guide them. But I read my first poem, and he pointed at me and he said, "This is real talent." And I was like, oh geez, I didn't even believe him. But that's when I really started turning up the gears and started to write as much as possible.
Wow. Impressive, impressive. Now, what are some of the useful tools used to start the writing process?
That's a difficult question. I think one of the hardest things to teach as a teacher is writing. I mean, you can teach, let's just put aside poetry for a second. You could teach a student the structure of, let's say, a 5-paragraph essay.
Right.
Every 5-paragraph essay begins with an introduction.
Right.
Usually the first sentence in that introduction is a hook.
That's it.
The end of the introduction is where you have your thesis statement. And then the beginning of the body of the essay, that first paragraph of the body, you're going to have a topic. So you can teach them all the structure. But if they haven't read and experienced life, they're not going to have a lot to say.
Thank you.
So before you can even teach anyone to be a good writer, they have to be a good reader. One of my, I don't read them so much anymore, but one of my favorite writers is a guy named James Michener. He's a historical novelist.
Yes.
And he has a big writing foundation at the University of Texas. And I remember reading this quote once, so many kids come up to him, you know, I want to be a writer. How do I become a writer? And the first thing he asks them, what have you read? What have you read? Have you read comic books your whole life? Have you read dime store novels, or have you read War and Peace? Have you read Brothers Karamazov? You know? Have you read Faulkner and Twain and all the other great authors from every continent, you know? So you have to be a good reader before you can become a good writer. That's just my opinion.
That's okay. That's coming from a person who's literate, who's come around, and it sure be interesting to hear from someone, let's say, hasn't been exposed to the great Western classics and reading, who come from different backgrounds or different trials, tribulations. How would they start getting into writing as well?
Yeah.
And that's something we're going to explore later on.
Another show.
Oh, yes, another show. Hey, you're going to be my partner. You're going to be one of my other partners here. I'm starting to put it together here. But I was touched by pretty much how you put it. And you talk about expression. What motivates that expression? You were bringing it up before, but I need to know in detail. Is that sort of like acting in a sense? When
It is a little bit. It is a little bit. Here, this is what I would say to that, LV. Human voice is so important. Okay? Human voice. And you can have a voice. Obviously, the main way you express your voice is by talking. But authors have a voice when they write a poem. Authors have a voice when they write a technical or a scientific article. Authors have a voice when they write a novel. A songwriter has a voice. You know, when you express your voice, you are just taking part in the great human conversation. So when you elevate poetry, they're just words on a page. You know, if I had just said, "Hey, read this," you might have read it. You might have been struck by the colors in it and the emotion, but it probably wouldn't have affected you the same way as it did when I put my voice to it and made it more human.
You remind me where you said that, but a songwriter has a voice, and I'm reminded of Bernie Taupin, who used to write
Elton
a lot.
John.
Yes.
He wrote all of his lyrics. by the
Yes,
way.
he did.
How much voice are in those lyrics? Leave Elton John out of the equation. There's so much humanity in Bernie Taupin's lyrics.
Yes, there is.
Love and loss.
Well, we're going to have
Everything.
We're going to have to hear something from your voice. So let's just share some more rich poetry.
More poetry? All right.
Rich poetry.
Rich poetry. All right, this one, okay, let's do, this is another one that was inspired by my trip to London, and this in fact is called From a Painting in London.
From a painting.
Now, for the life of me, I can't remember where I was at some museum, I saw the painting, and I wrote down the artist and have since lost it, but it inspired me to write this poem. So this is called From a Painting in London. Take my hands. They are yours for this moment. Wrap your own around them and feel the warmth that grows when one thing presses into another. Shake them just a little. Feel their age and their roughness. Now, look out the window, shyly smile, and let go. Any poem, this one especially, falls entirely short in describing the beauty of your skin on my skin, and the bones too, there underneath, steadfast. Can you feel them? I would, if I could, throw off every constraint and pull your body towards mine, but it's best just to draw in a breath, pause, and resolve to accept these mysteries that may never be solved.
Oh, wow. Oh, God, I got twisted in this one. When you first read it, I went from the beauty of that poetry just being gripped in a chokehold. Where the hand rests gently against the neck.
I choked you out with this poem?
Yes, you did. But
that's a good thing in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, right? That means you win the fight.
Yeah, I tap. But that really was so powerful, and so I not only saw the Jiu Jitsu side, but I saw the other side of humanity where there's like a relationship.
Yeah. Well, the painting was just a man and a woman, and they looked obviously like lovers. So there's a sensuality to the poem, and they were framed in this window, and they were holding hands. And so I just thought about it, and I thought about what's he thinking.
Yes.
You know, he's in love with her. You know. And he's wants to pull her closer, but he can't for some reason. He's constrained.
Yes.
Why is he constrained? Maybe he's married. Maybe he's a Christian, doesn't want to succumb to the temptations of the flesh. I don't know. I just saw him. I'm like, he looks constrained. He had her hand, looking, but there was a constraint about him. And that's what moved me the most about the painting to write this poem, was his constraint.
When we say, I notice when we say people of faith like Christian, but also since I have a big circle of friends who have a very strong moral fiber that says, hey, can't. So I just had to open it up a little more for the other audience members. So like I do respect pretty much just about anything but devil worshiping, but otherwise, I just was so taken by that.
Thank you very much.
And this is what you've been talking about. Poetry should be read out loud, which cannot be brought attention enough. That's what helps us be attracted more to the, like I said, unappreciated artistry of poetry. And
you know, when a poet reads, there are many poets who don't like to read their poetry out loud.
Obviously.
They don't like to read. They like it to exist on the page, and that's fine. Yes. The interesting thing about when a poet reads his poetry is now you're not just taken by the words. You're not just moved by the poem itself and the words on the page, but all of a sudden you're like looking at him or her, and the voice draws you in.
Yes.
And her eyes, or his hair, or what he's wearing, and the way he's gesticulating and moving, all of a sudden it becomes this really human experience that's, you know, three-dimensional, four-dimensional.
Spoken word is just like
deep,
drawing you in. It's just reeling you in, like you're a fish on that hook.
Yeah.
You're just being reeled right on in there. And that's why I find so fascinating about your poetry. When you read poems, you're not just sharing your work that you spent time writing it down. You say, I'm going to share this experience.
Yes.
And the best way I can share the experience is to put myself into, convey it, spoken sound word to you.
Tell it to you.
Tell it like it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell it like it is.
Yes. Oh, that was a good song.
Yeah.
So many poetry, I always, they're like songwriters are like poets, and they always have these hook lines like you talked about in your work.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the imagery, but I was still thinking about that mist in London. That just drew me right on in. Am I watching a movie or?
Yeah, well, what happens there in that scene is I'm watching the green, the unending green, thick and damp sprawl away.
Yes.
But it goes beyond my eye because it's taken by the mist.
Yes.
Miles away, all of a sudden it just disappeared into the mist. Taken by the mist, you know.
Is that how some people get into writing science fiction, poetry, when they just hear a poem and they're just drawn into it?
Maybe
and it becomes a novel or a sonnet It's just neat stuff.
Yeah.
Poetry can spawn many things.
It can, yeah, yeah.
Now, how do you share your poetry when you have the opportunity?
Well, over the years, I've actually been very cautious and a little bit shy about sharing it.
You mentioned that.
Yeah, I've written mainly just for myself, trying to, you know, become the best writer. I don't want to say, I almost said trying to perfect the craft, but I don't think I'm good enough to speak about myself
As
using
you tell
those words.
me, we do the best we can.
Right, so I'm just trying to become the best poet and writer that I can. So over the years, I've been cautious. What I have done these past couple of years, there are some colleagues that are very literate and you know, they're bibliophiles and they appreciate poetry. So I've just been kind of flicking them some in their teacher's box, you know, and you know, I have this one colleague, Robert Ward, who is a absolutely brilliant literature teacher down there in the inner city, and he's been at where I worked at Carver Middle School for many, many years, 18, I think. Anyway, this was his last year there. He's gone on to another school. But he has been critiquing it, just like an editor would, or and writing comments, and his response, to be honest, has been very favorable. And he was like, Christian, you know, you're ready to publish. So I'm looking, you know, for avenues, be it an online poetry journal or even something beyond that. But now I'm finally, at the age of 47, having been writing for 20 years, at this point, finally, after all this time, I think, okay, well, let me maybe try to publish some of these.
I don't see what's there to stop you. I'm reminded by
self-doubt, like Shakespeare said.
Yes.
Self-doubts are your own traitors.
Your demons. I'm reminded by my major mentor, who's a great writer. As a matter of fact, she encouraged me to become a teacher, and I says, me become a teacher? But she always shared some spoken word poetry that was written, but the way it was shared, today it still rings in my ears. Dr. May Cohen, Dr. May Cohen, she was the first African American woman to get a doctorate from USC in 1967, and she had to really tread some high waters. But she did keep her eye on the prize, and the most treasured thing she always treasured, and she even got me interested in writing more, creative writing with little exercises. So like, you bring that same spirit. You do.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
Well, I need you to come again, at least to share more poetry for a follow-up episode. And like I said, I have plans for you. Not that I'm going to monopolize everything, but no, we got to have you back. Yeah. So I want to thank Mr. Christian Zimmerman for coming in for this.
My pleasure.
First, see a journey into written spoken word of poetry. Hi folks, this is L.V. Smith of Sounds Within. And how do we get in contact with you, Christian?
You could email me
at
cmz411@yahoo.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. We will post that on our closing credits so people can get in contact. So until our next episode, see you again for Sounds Within.
Awesome. How about this? How about this? This is called Can't Look Past It. I have German blood, but an Irish heart, quite given to song and poetry. The lyrical sadness, the sweeping green hills that lift and fall far beyond the eye. I am prone to whiskey when it calls. Tullamore Dew does the trick when there's much to drown, and surely days and days will pass. But the thought of your gentle mouth inviting the